Hi, my name is Frank Schaefer, and I am a painter, an author, a one-time movie director, but most of all, I am a father and grandfather. And in my hierarchy of values, any kindness I have in life comes from the relationships that come from my family. And I find that a lot of my evangelical background that I fled from still informs the idea of kindness, of doing unto others as one would be done by. And that in dark moments of my life, I still rely on that moral framework, having left the theology of it behind. That said, I would like to share what I think is the heaviest burden on my heart these days, and probably on the hearts of many, many millions of Americans. And that is the utter betrayal of the historic Christian witness by so-called evangelical Christians, mostly white evangelical Christians, who voted for and to this day continue to support the absolute damnable, demonic cruelty of the Trump administration. When you look at Trump's reaction to the murder that took place in Los Angeles, the tragic murder of a wonderful man, a film director, and his wife in their house, allegedly by his own son, where Trump gloated and said, well, Rob Reiner opposed me, and so no wonder this happened to him, which is exactly what he said if you paraphrase his comment that he put on social media. And contrast that with Rob Reiner's reaction to the murder, the assassination of Kirk not so long ago, when he said that he admired his wife for forgiving the assassin. And as he put it, he said, I'm Jewish, but I admire this Christian response, this Christ-like response. And he put that on social media. You see the contrast between the baseline of humanity that we all count on to get through every day at the checkout counter at the supermarket, with someone we meet at the gas station, with people we work with family members, and the unhinged cruelty of Donald Trump and those that work with him. The inexcusable J.D. Vance, who has gone along with this. The inexcusable members of the White House staff who have gone along with this. And what stuns me is the fact that we have allowed ourselves to get used to this. We have allowed ourselves to get used to something that should be absolutely unthinkable. And that is a president of the United States who, instead of drawing our country together in times of crisis, pushes us further and further and further apart. And there's only one way, from my Christian background, to describe this type of behavior, using the theological terms that I was raised on, an evangelical home with my father, Francis Schaefer, and my mother, Edith Schaefer, famous evangelical writers and leaders. A faith I departed, but as I said, took certain base values with me for the rest of my life. And one of those basic values was to describe the sort of behavior that Donald Trump indulges in, his cruelty, as demonic. And what's interesting is that the white nationalist, Christian nationalist movement has bandied around the phrase of demonic, demon possession, demonic battles, battles with principalities and powers of darkness, to describe their own efforts to, as they would say, return America to Christian principles. The extremism of Project 2025 hinges on a lot of those sorts of ideas. And yet in our midst, right in front of our faces right now, we have a clear example of what, in theological terms from my childhood, my evangelical background with Francis and Edith Schaeffer, would have been called demonic possession. The only way to explain this level of rage, this level of trying to get back at one's opponents, this level of revenge, this level of self-centered selfishness, this level of irrational lashing out, outright lies again and again and again. But I think the real story here is not Donald Trump, who is clearly unwell, unhinged, and from a Christian point of view that I grew up with anyway, demon-possessed. Yes, that's what my mother or dad would have called such behavior, as lashing out against a man who had just had his throat cut, along with his wife, by their own drug-addicted, terribly deranged son. And so the evangelical call for some sort of spiritual warfare against evil, used as an excuse for what is clearly a case from their own theological point of view of demonic possession, sitting in the White House trashing our country, leaving us friendless in a world where we need friends, sucking up to Vladimir Putin and changing sides in the war that we had supported Ukraine in their fight for freedom against Russia, of sucking up to the Chinese now and saying that our only disagreement with them is over trade agreements and not the Chinese government hacking into American systems, stealing our industrial secrets, preparing for a war which we will lose. Trump, who has weakened our country in every single way, who has taken us further backward in terms of inflation and business policy and job creation than any president in my lifetime, in my 73 years. But the special aspect of the Trump presidency that stands out above all else is cruelty. And what is most amazing about that level of cruelty is not his cruelty. He has always been a cruel and unhinged man. He's always been a failure. He's always been a loser. His casinos, everything he touches, loses. And America is losing now and will continue to lose with him in the White House. But what is amazing is that he still has a level of support with people who claim to be attached to a theology that recognizes demonic possession, that recognizes naked evil, that casts their own fight for a return to Christian principle as a demonic possession problem that the whole country suffers from, whether it's because of being pro-abortion or pro-divorce or pro-adultery or gay marriage or all these other things that they have turned into battles of so-called family values. But when it comes to President Trump, it's not just a question of this thrice married adulterer, credibly accused by 28 women at the very least of sexual molestation and even rape, connected deeply at the hip for decades with Jeffrey Epstein and all the rest of it. The biggest item that stands out, where everything he is, does, and says contradicts the spirit of the gospel, is his cruelty. There are all sorts of unhinged people with terrible marriage relationships, broken promises who lie, con artists who lie, but who don't have the basic golden thread of cruelty running through their personality that Trump has, that makes him absolutely unique in American history, to the point where there's not even a pretense of hypocrisy to pretend that he's anything different than a cruel, angry, vicious man. And again, the story here is not his cruelty. It's that this is not called out by people who still march to the beat of his deadly death march drum. The cruelty of the Trump administration is what marks it as unique in history, above all else. And if there is anything that is a denial of the basic essence of the gospel, it is cruelty. My name is Frank Schaeffer.